So welcome to our R&R. We're going to have 30 minutes together blending elements of mindfulness, meditation, and restorative yoga. And so that means we're going to hold some longer postures, but in really supported ways. In this particular class, we're really going to focus on the hips and the inner groin and really getting into the spine and the low back as well. So a beautiful opportunity to kind of work through those physical spaces. In a ton of props today. I'm going to cue with a couple of blankets, and if there's anything you like a bolster or anything for Shavasana, you're welcome to do so. And if you would like, I do have a playlist I'm going to drop in the chat if you'd like some music on in the background. So this week at the studio, we're exploring Vairagya, which is this element, this state of remaining detached to the material world, in particular, these kind of elements and metrics of success around achievement, around what we think makes us whole. We have a lot of external messages around what will complete us. I mean, there's this kind of never-ending search for feeling complete, and actually we can begin to disrupt that. And so this week in particular, the invitation is to really create some spaciousness around what the world tells us we should be or should want, or what we reach for, what's possible for us even. And so the invitation is to pause, to breathe, to invite spaciousness around all of those things, to really discern what's really true for you in terms of metrics of success, in terms of meaning, in terms of what values and elements call you forward. And so I think coming to the breath and the body is a beautiful invitation to begin that element of creating spaciousness. So we're going to begin on our mats with a couple of blankets. And so as we come to our mats, I invite you to grab a blanket, and we're going to bring it out really wide. So I'm going to go like this half of the blanket and bring it out. And actually, I want it even bigger. So I'm going to undo it all the way so that it can come out to either side of my mat. And in this case, I don't need really a lot of length on the mat, but I want width on the mat. So I've gone ahead and folded it again just to create some space. So I'm going to bring my hips down to here. And if you want to bring your other blanket towards the top of your mat, total yogi's choice. I'll in fact cue without that other blanket, but if you have one and want to use it there, you can. So what we're going to do is come to a tabletop position and really plant our hands over top of this blanket and just lower our belly and our hips down to the blanket. And you really want your hip bones to hit either halfway down, like really in the middle of the blanket, or actually even towards the top of the blanket. So we don't so much care about the upper belly and the chest and the ribs, but we care about the low belly and the hip bones in particular. So as we come down to the mat, I invite you to just kind of check in with the low back, maybe rocking a little from side to side, creating some freedom in that low back, in the sacrum in particular. And then as you're ready, you can either bring forehead down to this folded blanket, or you can simply stack one hand on top of the other underneath the forehead, letting the elbows come out to kind of a wide position, and just gently lower the forehead down to your hands. And allowing the eyes to close or the gaze to soften. I invite you to breathe in, inviting the breath really deep and full within you. Noticing the breath as it fills and opens through the chest and the ribs and the belly, deep down into the tailbone. And as you exhale, allow yourself to really release and let go. Just letting the breath come in and the breath come out. And if you notice that for you, you have any tension or constriction at the low back, you can take a slight tuck of the tailbone to elongate in that space and invite a deeper element of softening. And in this posture of surrender, in this posture of beginning of our practice here today, I invite you to let go of what other tensions or preoccupations or distractions you might find in the world around you. Almost as if setting down something that you're carrying, simply set down your attention to your external environment. And breath by breath, heartbeat by heartbeat, allow your attention and awareness to simply rest in the wave of your breath, in the rhythm and the presence of your heartbeat, and the textures and contours you find in your inner environment. Letting yourself notice how it feels to breathe and be right where you are, just as you are. Depending on what kinds of things might be pulling us in these outward directions. Sometimes that shift to our inner world can feel like ease. And sometimes it can feel far more clumsy or inelegant or imperfect. And as you notice that, let yourself release the need to have to even label it. But if you need a deeper touch point for your mind to begin to rest, if you notice a lot of mental activity, bring your attention and awareness to your inhale and your exhale. As you breathe in, you can gently repeat to yourself in your inner voice, breathing in, I am breathing in. And as you exhale, repeat, I am breathing out. I am breathing out. Taking one more deep, full inhale. And as you exhale, give yourself a gentle sigh out the mouth. And then without even needing to move your upper body or your hands, just begin to bend through the right knee and bring the right knee out to the right side so that the knee and the hip are in alignment. You can let that knee be supported by the blanket that we've already placed out. Letting the right leg come into an L shape with a 90-degree bend at the knee. Letting the inner edge of the knee rest on the blanket as the inner thigh also finds support. And as the inner edge of the right ankle and right big toe press into the earth. And then as you're ready, simply inviting the muscles and the tissues to soften around the bones of the right hip and the right leg. Letting the breath flow in fully and deeply. Letting the breath flow out. Letting the exhalation lengthen. If you like, you can continue the awareness practice with the breath. As you inhale, breathing in. I am breathing in. And as you exhale, releasing the breath, breathing out. I am breathing out. And then as you complete each phrase, letting yourself feel the sensation in the wake of that awareness. Finding 2 more rounds of breath here. With your final exhale, keeping your upper body planted and just gently moving that right leg back into alignment, stretching the right leg out on the mat, and then bending through the left leg, bringing the left knee up in parallel alignment with the left hip, letting the left leg come into that L shape, opening through the inner groin, noticing the glutes and the quads, adjusting in kind. Taking a full breath in, and a big sigh of release as you settle in here. And as we allow our attention and awareness to rest in the pathways and the substance of the breath moving in and out, and the textures and contours we find within our tissues, within our bodies, within our beings, we begin to become the witness of who and how we are in this very breath. And we can give ourselves permission to be that witness, to notice what the witness notices and how, and release any sense of labeling or judgment or criticism. To just come with curiosity and wonder. to the one who is witness to the life within you. Right here in this breath, right here in this heartbeat. Finding one more deep, full round of breath here. And as you exhale, gently raising the head, only enough to create spaciousness to move within the arms, planting the palms underneath the shoulders, moving that left leg back into alignment, and then gently tucking through the toes, really rooting those knees into the mat, and gently pressing through the torso, coming up through a tabletop position, perhaps adjusting those knees onto the blanket, letting the knees go wide, letting the hips sink back into a child's pose. And I'm going to invite you, rather than having just a standard static posture for this child's pose, to just gently shift the hips around and slightly in towards the mat. So as you shift to the right, edging that left hip towards the mat. And as you shift to the left, edging the right hip towards the mat. Just gently exploring the range of motion in your hips. And then as you bring the hips towards the heels, centered on the mat, really plant and root through the right hand as you reach the left hand underneath the right arm and just reaching out with the left arm. So this is kind of a variation of thread the needle. We're keeping that child's pose, hip and spine placement, but just adding a little twist. Inhale to fill with the breath. As you exhale, bring that left arm back and through. And then really rooting through that left palm, reaching right arm under left. With your next exhale, coming back to center, taking one more inhale as you reach the hips back towards the heels, stretching through the upper body, and then coming to a tabletop position. So I'm going to invite you to go ahead and keep the blanket underneath the center. But if you have tight hips, you may want another folded blanket to help support in our next posture. So we're going to move into our sleeping swan. And so I invite you to come to a tabletop position. And then we're going to take the right foot and stamp it forward. So we have this big L shape. And then you're going to heel toe that right foot all the way across your mat and invite the right knee down so that the lower part of the right leg is crossing across the mat. And so as we begin to feel into our hips here, I want you to notice, is there any feeling of vulnerability in the knee? If so, I'm going to invite you to bring that right heel in closer towards the groin. So essentially, rather than keeping that really square alignment of the lower right leg, you're going to tuck it in, tuck that right foot in a little further. And then I want you to notice what the hips are doing. So once you find a space where you're not putting a lot of instability in that right knee, maybe we need to heel toe the left foot out further to bring the emphasis back into the hips. And so once we've kind of got our main setup here, I want you to notice how much space is between your right hip and the ground. If there's quite a bit of space, that's the space where we want to bring that folded blanket under the right hip. And then notice as we begin to set up into the deeper element of this posture, As you begin to inhale and grow tall through the spine, keep the emphasis in the hips and gently lower yourself down, really pressing into the hands to keep the weight pressing into the hips. If we tend to fold forward without that integrity, all of our weight might shift into that right knee. So lowering yourself down. If you have a bolster handy, you can also come down to that. And really let the breath flow deep into this right hip. Keeping that present moment awareness. Breathing in and noticing how the breath fills you. Breathing out and noticing how the breath releases. Finding 3 more deep, full breaths here. With your final exhalation, beginning to prop up the upper body, coming back into that very proud swan. And then you're going to tuck the back toes and begin to shift that back knee a little forward to give yourself a little spaciousness in the hips again. Taking out the blanket if you've used it. And then we're just going to gently open up, lifting through the hips, bringing that right knee back to that tabletop position, and then stepping right toes back, extending through the right leg. Really stretching through that calf, but if you like, you can shift a little forward and shift a little back as circulation flows fully again. As you exhale, come back to that tabletop position. And then we're going to stamp the left foot forward. And we're going to find heel toe across the mat and find the position on the other side. Now, maybe this side is the same and maybe it's different. So you have to check in with that left knee and begin to notice how far out you can extend that lower left leg from your hips. And maybe you're tucking that left foot closer towards the hips. Then begin to shift the back knee back so that your emphasis falls back into the hips, really squaring them towards the front of your mat. And if need be, you can add that blanket under the left hip to give even more support. Then take a big deep inhale as you straighten and grow through the spine. And as you exhale, begin to fold forward. But again, press into the palms so that your whole body begins to root back into the hips, so that we don't add pressure to the knee. And then once you find your depth here, reconnect to the flow of your breath. Reconnect to the sensation you find within that left hip and all the structures around it. Oftentimes we carry a lot of tension in our hips. Maybe that's true for you, maybe not. But release the tendency to need to judge that tension and simply notice if when you add tension here, because in this kind of posture, tightness in the hips invites more tension, as it's constructive tension as we come into this posture. And so the invitation is to notice, do I hold here? Do I cut off my breath? Do I hold myself in more tension? Or can I invite the breath deeper to create a sense of dynamic flow? So that even though I'm feeling more sensation, I'm being challenged in certain ways, but I'm not adding tension in a way that cuts off the flow of life. Finding one more deep, full round of breath here. And then as you exhale, begin to prop up through the upper body and the torso. We're going to heel toe that back knee a little bit closer so we can create a little more lift in the hips. And then we can move out any props and come back to that tabletop position. Stepping back with the left toes, feeling that flow of circulation, that stretch through the long edge of the left leg. Taking one more deep, full breath in and a big sigh of release. And finally coming back to that tabletop position, we're going to begin to set up for our final resting posture. And so there are lots of options here. You can keep this blanket underneath to really support the hips. You can add a folded blanket towards the top of the mat to support the neck and the head and the tops of the shoulders. And for some people, if you have a bolster, you might want that underneath the knees. And so make your choices here. There's no wrong answer. And as you're ready, begin to lower yourself down to your back, adjusting any props as needed. Taking a big full breath in as you adjust the shoulder blades down the back, letting yourself open again through the heart, letting the collarbones spread, letting the legs go long and the feet splay open, letting your hands rest wide at your side, palms facing the sky, open and ready to receive. It is here that we truly release any attachments we have to our external environment, that we release the conscious efforting of the breath and the body to give ourselves this space to be as we are, to let the effects of our practice metabolize and integrate, to let ourselves actually receive the life, the brilliance, the wonder that we are. It's all right here within you. So let the breath flow naturally. Let yourself be held here just as you are. Let this heartbeat be enough. Once again, I invite you to connect to the wave of your breath, the rhythm and the presence of your heartbeat. Gently beginning to wiggle through the fingers and toes, noticing movement here again. As you exhale, extending the arms overhead, really feeling that length and depth from the soles of your feet through to your fingertips. With your next exhale, hugging the knees into the chest, beginning to rock from side to side here, feeling that sacrum rooted to the earth, feeling that capacity of your mat and your connection to just massage the low back here. Eventually bringing yourself over to a side of your choice, pausing in this yogic posture of rebirth. It is here that we are reminded that we begin again in every breath, with choice, with sovereignty, with wholeness. With your next breath, inviting yourself back up to seated in whatever way serves you. Letting the palms connect in front of your heart. Left palm in union with right palm. A slight tuck of the chin as you bow towards your heart. Namaste in its simplest form means the light in me honors and acknowledges the light in you. Bringing thumbs to third eye center between the eyebrows and the forehead, bowing forward to seal your practice. Namaste.